Ashley is actually a business development team lead at Zesty. And we're really, really excited to have her hosting our webinar. One of the two main topics that she's going to talk about, one is going to be how to make that transition into high tech, which is what we're really all doing here and what we're really looking into. And the next thing that she's going to talk about is a little bit about her journey transitioning into the tech industry, specifically how she got to her position at Zesty. So we're really, really excited to have Ashley with us. So first of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank Ashley for joining us and kind of giving her a little bit of our insight. This session is going to be recorded just like all the other sessions. And the reason that it's recorded is because unfortunately a lot of people can't join live and they still would love to kind of hear your insight. So again, thank you so much for joining us. To us, just a few kind of thoughts before we begin. One, anyone who's able and willing to turn on your camera and kind of show us your beautiful faces, we would love that. Ashley was kind enough to allow this webinar to be really an open dialogue with all of us. So as she goes along and kind of goes through her slides, she's open to any questions that you guys have. Obviously we do have to, keep this session in the time slot that we scheduled it for. But she's definitely open to you asking questions as she goes along with the slides, as well as adding, a Q&A at the end. So there will be time for questions as well. So without further ado, I am really excited to welcome Ashley. And again, I just repeat, anyone who can turn on their camera, that would be so appreciated. So we can kind of all see each other and all have a conversation while she talks. So Ashley, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and speak to you all. I'll start sharing my screen. All right. So as you can tell, my name's Ashley. As mentioned, I am the team lead of the BDRs at Zesty. I'll go into a bit about what Zesty is and what we do later on in the presentation, but I wanted to begin now to talk a bit about the process of from applying into tech all the way to interviewing and then growing within tech. So we'll start with applying and then I'll talk about myself. So a really important thing that I share with my friends and also really helped me when I was getting into tech, just some background, I guess. I came to Israel about 5 years ago, right from university. I finished university, graduated, moved to Israel, made Aliyah, and joined the IDF. And after I finished my army service, I decided I wanted to go into sales and be a BDR. So I started applying in high tech. And something that's really important that sometimes is overlooked is in order to be a BDR, you have to start from when you're applying. You have to apply those skills the minute you start applying. You have to sell yourself to get into the role, right? So LinkedIn is something that my team and I, when I was a BDR too, use on a daily basis. And it's something when looking for jobs is a very helpful tool. As you probably are aware, you can look for jobs on LinkedIn, but on top of that, you can use it for its purpose of networking. So it's really important to network. The way I use LinkedIn, and I recommend you do, is you look for job posts, I don't know, BDR, SDR, whatever it is you're interested in, and you see, okay, Zesty is hiring, for example. You find a company, great. Next thing you're going to do is look up who is on the team of whatever position you're applying to. Okay, let's say I want to be a BDR at Zesty. I'd look up within the company who's a BDR and I'd reach out to them on LinkedIn. Hey, so-and-so, I see you're a BDR at Zesty. I'm really excited to become a BDR and I'm interested in applying to Zesty. Do you have 5 minutes sometime this week that we can speak to learn a little bit more about the culture and your role? Most people will give you 5 minutes. Same thing I tell my team once they are actually BDRs. Ask for 5 minutes. People can always give 5 minutes of their time. It's a small ask. Generally, people at different companies will say yes, and then you can hop on a 5-minute call with them. the point of this call is not just to learn about the position. Okay, you want it to come across as like, oh, friendly, I'm excited about the role, but it's actually so at the end of the call, if the position and the company sounds like something you'd be interested in being a part of, you can ask them, thank you so much for speaking to me about Zesty. Sounds like a great company. Would you mind submitting my resume or referring me to your recruiter, to your HR for the position? That is an excellent way to get your CV to the top of the pile. And incentives to refer, what I mean by that is at most, if not all, high-tech companies, there are referral bonuses. So for example, if someone in the company refers someone to the BDR team and they get selected to join the team and they get an offer and they're on the team for like, I think X amount of months, the person who referred them gets a bonus. So people want to refer people outside from the organization to the organization. So that is another reason why you want to network and use LinkedIn, because even if you don't know anyone at the company, you can approach them, outbound them, and have them refer you. So off this note, I wanted to ask if anyone has any questions so far.
Quick question from your experience. When you have people reaching out to you, for instance, on LinkedIn, do you actually manage to respond to everyone? Are there messages where like sometimes you can't respond or things like that?
Sure. So it really depends. For me, because I was the team lead and I put out actually on my LinkedIn that I was hiring when I was hiring for my team, a lot of people were reaching out to me to speak to begin the interview process. And I was inundated with LinkedIn messages and I couldn't speak to everyone because it's not just a casual call at that point. I'm like actually like the hiring manager. Whereas I'm sure that if someone reached out to my team, and I've also like reached out to people at companies before to ask about like the culture questions, usually someone that isn't the hiring manager, so someone that's like on the team that is just like a BDR or a senior BDR or SDR, they'll have more time and they'll take the time to speak. I would find it very unlikely that someone would say no unless it's just like not in their personality. Okay. Again, also using LinkedIn and your network, you can see who else is friends with people in the company. If you have any mutual connections, and you can try and leverage that too. If you're friends with the mutual connection, let's say, oh, my roommate is actually friends with someone that works at Monday. Hey, roommate, can you please introduce me to this person you know at Monday? Maybe they don't actually know them and they're just connections, but maybe they do. So that is a solid way to get your foot in the door without any sort of connection to high tech.
Great advice. I definitely second that.
Moving on to interviewing. So preparing for interviews. As I mentioned, I was the hiring manager. When I first started at Zesty, we were 30 people. It was a really small startup and there were no processes in place. There was a head of HR and then that was it. So I was hiring single-handedly for my team, the entire process. So not only have I interviewed for positions, but now I've also interviewed people, hundreds of people. So I am going to share some questions I ask and some things that I would do for my interviews that I think really set you aside from the pack. And that's preparing for the interview. It's always hard to prepare for an interview because usually you have a few interviews and you want to make sure you know everything and you can't possibly know everything about a company. So these are the 5 main things to do for the interview. First, know about the company, right? You look up the company on Crunchbase. Have they had any funding recently? Did they just get Series A, B, C, IPO, whatever? Good to know. Don't necessarily have to bring it up. Important to know in case there is a chance for you to slide in that knowledge. Second of all, were there any mergers or acquisitions? Were they just voted on G2 or the Magic Quadrant? by Gartner as a leader or something? Or they the best, was there a post in the news about them? Oh, best workplace for 2022. Anything you can find that's interesting about the company, note it down. Then products. If there's a product or a platform or several products, know them. You don't need to know them super well, like you know your neighborhood, but you should know the names of the product or products or platform and like a general high level understanding of what they do. You don't need to know the specifics, just like, okay, Zesty has to do with cloud automation. There's 2 products. This is the name of this one. I think this is what this one does. This is the name of the second one. And this is what I believe this one does from my understanding. That's really important, especially if you have several products, to at least be aware of the names of the products. Next, I would recommend looking up their customers. So I'm looking at Zesty, for example. You can see usually on most websites, there's like on the homepage, the plaque of logos that they have, or you can look in case studies under customers. Try and find 5 customers, write them down, and know the customers by heart, because you can bring it up. Oh, I see so-and-so is your customer. Looks great. Again, simple way of showing that you did your research without having the researcher or the interviewer, excuse me, ask you, did you do your research, kind of a thing. And then competitors, same thing. Google quickly, Zesty top competitors, or whatever the company is. You should get between 3 to 5 competitors and show that you understand the space that they're in, the industry, who they're going against. And finally, this is a little extra. It's always nice to just understand who your interviewer is. Look them up on LinkedIn. They're going to see that you looked them up. Even that shows that you've done some research. You can take it a step further, see if they've had any posts recently that they wrote that were insightful, and maybe be like, hi Ariella, like, thank you so much for taking this interview with me. By the way, I just wanted to say, when I was preparing for this interview, I noticed that you wrote a post on something Jolt something. It was really insightful. I really enjoyed reading it. It makes them feel good, and it shows that, again, you know how to do research, because these things also kind of foreshadow your ability as a BDR. Any questions here?
You actually made a very interesting comment. I have to say the element of foreshadowing your role as a BDR. I almost feel like I would love it if you can like talk about that just a little bit more, just like explain the logic between knowing how to prepare and how that correlates for you, like how that shows you a candidate's abilities as a business development representative.
For sure. So something that's really important once you get into the BDR role is being able to do research, especially if you're outbound, and also for inbound. But as an outbound BDR, you're gonna have to try and find ways to begin a conversation with people who have no idea who you are, don't want to talk to you. And sometimes it can be by finding something on their LinkedIn and being like, oh, this post you shared on cloud infrastructure I totally agree with you. It's going in the right direction or whatever. So that is definitely a skill that's important, as well as understanding like competitors and customers. You're going to have to look at different companies and decide if they're actually in a good vertical for your ideal customer profile when you're in the company. So those are just certain things that if you already can do before the job and you have kind of like the instinct for it, will put you ahead once you're in the position.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking from a recruiter's perspective, like if I were to give someone advice on that I would definitely say like showing that you have those abilities in the interview process is probably something that shows them that you're not just a qualified candidate, but also a good, sales oriented type person, that you're able to network and like connect with people. So that's a really good tip. Thank you so much for that. Sorry, anyone have any questions so far?
I had like a spotlight idea in my head that you actually told about the research about not only about the company and customers, also about the competitors. And I thought, wow, it can bring you So it can give you some questions you can ask the interviewer, recruiter, hiring manager, no matter, because we always say like, show that you're interested, show that you're motivated to join the company, to join the team. And if you know who is against like this company, what are the competitors, what are the advantages over these competitors for this company, what do you see? Like you can ask your hiring manager about that, like, how do you, I don't know,
differentiate?
How do you bring your customers? How do you like help them to stay with you? How do you like make them fall in love with your product instead of going to another company, to another product? That can help you to come up with some questions that can show you that you are motivated and to show that you really made a research and you know what is the industry about.
Exactly. It's the subtle being able to like drop something in during the interview that shows, wow, like I've done my research. And we as interviewers, and I'm sure as recruiters too, recognize it. We can spot it, and it puts you on another level. Instead of me trying to be like, how well does Steve really know Zesty? I can be like, wow, I can already tell that Steve like put in some effort. Sorry that I used you as an example, Steve. All right. So going more into the interview, these are my top 4 questions I ask BDRs when I was interviewing candidates for my team. And I'll explain a little bit behind each one as well. So the first one is, I would always ask, hypothetically, if I asked your manager, what is the hardest part about managing you? What would you say? This is kind of a weird question, but from a manager's perspective, I want to know that I'm going to be able to manage someone like you, right? I want to make sure it's going to be a good fit. On the other side, it can show a bit about like what a weakness is, something that needs improvement rather, from the side of the candidate. Also, on top of that, it shows awareness because they're able to know what they need improvement on. And a follow-up question, that I generally will ask is, knowing this, how do you plan to, I don't know, go about this differently? Or, oh, if time management is an issue. So knowing that time management is an issue, how do you plan to make it less of an issue, not in that wording, in this role?
Right, like how they plan to improve on
exactly
that. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. A more commonly asked question I think in the industry would be like, what is your weakness, or what is something that is a weakness for you? But this is just how I phrased it. Okay. 2, I always ask, where do you see yourself in your career in 2 years? It's a question that I was asked when I was first applying as a BDR, and it really stuck with me. Like 2.5 years later, I still remember this question and I use it too. And I think it's important because, okay, if I ask someone, oh, where do you see yourself in 2 years? And they say, oh, I see myself as an actress. Okay, like great. But I'm not sure, when I'm hiring someone, I want to make sure, 1, they're interested in the position, and 2, it's something they want to continue with and grow with the company, even if it's not like a BDR forever. I don't expect anyone to be a BDR for more than X amount of time, but I'd like to see that they want to stay somewhere in the realm of sales, high tech. On the other hand, I don't want someone to be like, oh, I just see myself growing within the company to a higher position. I want you to be aware of what the growth options are. Even if you don't know exactly what you want to be in 2 years, understand where you can go from BDR. So if you say, oh, I'd love to become an AE, an account executive, or, oh, I'm interested eventually going into management and be a team lead. Or even if it's like, I really am excited about being a BDR, I want to break into tech, and I want to eventually use those skills to go into partnerships, fine. But also don't go too far out, right? Like you don't want to say, oh, I really want to go into marketing in 2 years, even if it's what you want, because you want, again, to stay within the realm of the sales. Third, why do you want to be a BDR? Some people just want to go into tech for the money, and I think that's great, but I want to find someone that's passionate. Some people are like, oh, I really want to be a BDR because I want to talk to people. Yes, you are talking to people, you're cold calling, but if you make 100 calls in a day, you may only have 3 or 4 conversations. So that may not be the best for you. So just really think about, why do you want to be a BDR? And I'll give you an example of what I said. This isn't the right thing to say, but I showed you what I wouldn't say. So I'll show you what I said in my interview at SciSense. They're like, oh, Ashley, why do you want to be a BDR? And I said, well, I really like having to think on my feet, and I like having to overcome challenges. So I think being a BDR would be really interesting for me, because when I'm on a call and someone has an objection, I have to think a way around the objection. And I like that challenge. So that's what I said. Is that the best answer? Probably not. But I hope that gives a little bit of insight and help. And finally, what are your hobbies? This sounds like kind of a filler question, but actually I am interested in you and what you are interested in and what you like, because not only are you joining the team as a BDR, you're a human being. I want to make sure you're a culture fit. I want to make sure that you're someone fun to work with and be with for most of my day. So I think really be your authentic self when they ask about your hobbies. You don't need to try and impress anyone. Like, tell them like what you like. Any questions here? I know I kind of just talked a lot. Okay.
I have one before you continue.
Sure.
All these questions, first of all, again, I'm like always bringing in my recruiter experience. And I love how all of these questions really do say a lot about a person's passion for the industry. I think one question that might go through a lot of people's minds transitioning into the tech industry is that some people come with, a large amount or not a large amount, maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but many years of experience in, let's say, a specific industry that they loved, and now they're kind of learning and discovering the entry level roles in tech, and business development being one of those entry level roles in the tech industry. Maybe some people don't necessarily know how to word that passion in a way that translates to, I want to be a business development representative, and it might come off as more of like a general, I want to join the tech industry. And my question, I guess, leading into a question here, I'm wondering, how do you feel about interviewing people who like don't necessarily know that business development is their passion, but they're very interested in like the general skills that are required for a business development representative?
So I think actually you hit the nail on the head with your ending there. You don't need to know why you're passionate or if you're passionate about being a BDR. You just have to explain why the skills appeal to you and just push that. So you can be like, oh, I don't know. I don't have something off the top of my mind, but maybe you could be like, oh, messaging. Like I don't use LinkedIn often because I'm a car repairman, but I see people on LinkedIn and posting, and I think it could be really interesting to reach out to people on LinkedIn and use my love and former degree as an English major to create messaging and reach out to people. I don't know, but tie it in. Also, my team is entirely made up of people who were not BDRs ever, have no experience. There's 10 people on my team. Not a single one was a BDR before. Some were lawyers, some were underground heating, door-to-door salesmen, some were construction workers, like math majors. We have a whole bunch, worked at a grocery store. So you don't need to be a BDR or know that it's your passion. Just like show that you're excited about it and explain it a bit.
Like tie it into an answer that relates to the business development role, but not necessarily as like, yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Oh, I'm with my camera on. I've been I'm a business development manager in another industry. I was wondering, I was very passionate about making the business about this, but it's only the opening doors section, the BDR in the high tech, if I'm not wrong, if I understand it correctly, they divided it to sales and account managing, and the business development is the part they do is opening the doors. That's what I have been doing for the last 10 years. But I continued to the other sections, the sales and the customer success, if I can call it this way, the emotional and the technical support afterwards in the customer. So how do you define, if I may ask, or how do you define the differences between the BDR world and the other worlds of the customers world?
I think that's an excellent question, because it's something that's especially unclear if you're not in the industry, and even in tech, sometimes it can get blurred. The way I define, again, this is my definition, it could be different to other people, but I think generally business development reps are the top of the pipeline, right? We're reaching out, we're opening the door, as you said, to the customer, the potential customer. We're bringing in the meetings, we're getting the interest of the companies. I think that account executives, what I used to say to my parents for them to understand, because they're not in tech at all. My dad's in finance, my mom's a teacher. So I'd be like, I bring the deal and my account executive closes the deal. And as for customer success, I see it as more of a relationship maintaining and upselling. So they continue the relationship once the person has become a customer, and also try to eventually, I guess, sell them other products within.
So here, if we're in the family, so we can talk openly. We are actually flirting with customers. We try to hitting on them in order to make a business. That's the accurate definition of our job.
Exactly. You're trying to get their interest, bring them to a meeting, give them just enough information so they're like, oh, wow. And then let someone else take over the sales cycle. Again, there's some roles of BDR where they do the entire sales cycle, but that, based off of my career experience, that's what I've dealt with. It's just the beginning of the pipeline, which is the most important, in my opinion. So without that, there's no.
Why do you find it the most important? Because this is the first impression?
I find it the most important because without this outreach, granted, it's a BDR system of the company. If the BDRs aren't bringing in meetings, the account executives don't have a pipeline. There's no ability to get customers or create opportunities because there's nothing coming in. So that's why I think it's really important.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that helped. Okay. So this is really brief. This is the Zesty interview process. It's pretty standard for the industry. Basically, it begins once you've submitted your CV, hopefully with a referral, but also okay if not. You get an initial phone screen, which is usually informal, 5 to 10 minutes, with either the recruiter or the team lead or HR. Just to understand, like, to go over your CV, make sure everything checks out, kind of like a check of your level of language, if it's like a French speaking role, or if it's English, to make sure you're a native speaker, if the role calls for that. And then you're moved into the Bdr Assessment, which for us, it's a 2-day take-home assessment, which it shouldn't take 2 days, but it's basically, I made my assessment for Zesty BDRs to be like a day in the life. So I have people prospect to companies based off of what they understand Zesty is, explain why they're going after those companies, why they think they'd be a good fit, where they found the companies, find 3 contacts for each company, and then explain how they would reach out to them over a week. I know it's shorter than normal. Usually you'd reach out for much longer, but I don't want to give too much work to my candidates. And I'd ask how they'd stand out, what the value props they understand are, and finally, an example of an email to one of your prospects that you found. From there, there's an assessment review. So I would, as the team lead, I then would review the assessment with the candidate, and I would have it be for them to lead that session, explain what they went through, talk about it together. I'll ask them questions about things. This is just for us as managers to understand your thought process, to see how creative you are, if you think outside the box, to understand your writing level and skills, and again, to understand how you think. Because as I said, especially like my team, no one had a BDR experience prior. It's interesting to see how they're able to apply these skills without having had the skills. You can kind of see who has more of a inkling for it. At the end of the assessment review, I usually do a role play or a fake cold call. And I personally tell the candidates that I'm not looking to see how well they know Zesty, because I understand they only have limited resources. I'm just looking to see how they overcome objections. And I think that's generally what managers will be looking for. If someone's like, oh, okay, like in the role play, send me an email. They want to see you kind of push a little bit further. Sure, I'm happy to send you an email. I'm also going to send you a sync on your calendar for 2 days after to go over any questions or whatever. Just to make sure to see if that person doesn't just give up on the first no or pushback. If they get past that pushback, I'm like, okay, cool. You have some grit. Then it's followed by interviews, at least for Zesty, with our head of sales and our head of HR. Then we check references and you receive an offer. It is 6 steps, it's long, but we condense it to about a week now. So it can really, a lot of these processes are this many steps, but it doesn't feel like it because it's like 3 interviews in one day kind of a thing. Or yeah. Okay. Moving along. Some red flags. No matter how casual and like laid back your interviewer is, do not use profanity. It's really off-putting. Not just, I know it's like, oh, well, it's Israel, it's more casual, but especially if you're reaching out to the Israeli market, the American market, you want to make sure that you come off as professional, and then it's an interview. You want to look professional. So you don't want to be cursing in your interview. I would not lie about your capabilities. And this is especially for language. For example, if you're a French speaker, you should really be fluent in French. You should be able to speak, write, and read. Because eventually, if it's not caught in the interview process, it will be found out in your role, and that generally does not end so well. So just make sure you are really truthful and upfront. Obviously, everyone exaggerates a little bit on their CV, but don't be like, oh yes, I speak fluent Russian when you are just on Duolingo every other day. And finally, this is so important. Do not submit anything without double checking for errors. I cannot tell you the number of assessments I received where the candidate misspelled the company they're prospecting's name, or they wrote something completely incorrect, or the sentence didn't make sense. And unfortunately, I look really into that. That for me, I can't take a candidate to the next round knowing that they did this mistake, even if it's one time, because you have 2 days to do this assessment. Now imagine what I'm thinking as a manager when I'm like, okay, but this person's going to have 1 minute to send a LinkedIn message in the middle of a busy day. I can't have you send a message or an email to a prospect with the company name misspelled or lots of errors and typos. It's just not professional. So just make sure for everything you submit, you've gone over and double checked. Do I have any questions?
Just a quick question on that, or kind of on the red flags that you mentioned. Like well, for the first one is about let's say you gave the example of languages, for instance. So the additional foreign language is more rare, but 90% of like high-tech companies are expecting a certain level of English.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we're also, in Israel, and majority of the Israelis are not native speakers. So when a native Israeli writes that they're fluent in English, and they're not necessarily on a native level, but they definitely can hold a conversation, minimal mistakes, and they feel semi-confident in English. Would you say that that would be considered a lie in your opinion, or would that be, the appropriate exaggeration? And then that's one question. And then the second would be in terms of, double checking everything. Would you say that you put more importance, you specifically as a manager, put more importance on, the detail orientation of a person's assignment as opposed to like the actual professional level of the specific content, meaning like you mentioned that they don't know Zesty, they don't necessarily know your clientele, so they don't know the details, but like they pay attention to how they actually gave in the assignment? I hope that question was clear.
It makes sense. So I'll begin with the second one because it's fresh. Of course, it's like important that I can see that someone was able to do enough research to understand, okay, this is like who I should be looking for in the company. Like read G2, look at the testimonials, who wrote them. That's usually a good clue. It's like basic, but beyond that, yes, like it is really important to me. If someone did something perfect, like they reached out, they put all the right titles in their assignment, but then they like totally misspelled things, that would cross them off my list. Because at the end of the day, I can teach you who to go after. I can teach you who our customer profile is. It's helpful if you can already figure that out a little bit. But I can't micromanage you to the point where I'm checking all your messages before you send them out. And I want to be able to trust that my team is going to do top level messaging. As for language capabilities, I totally understand that we're in Israel, and so English will not be necessarily native. I think it's more of, can you actually hold a conversation? If you understand that it's a technical product, are you able to do these technicalities and talk about the lingo in the language that the customer is going to be speaking? So like super technical English that even could be hard for an English speaker. Like, are you comfortable speaking to people like that? That you really need to understand. I have an Israeli born. He actually went through Jolt, and he's on my team. He's not native American or English speaker. He's not an American. He's an Israeli, but he is fluent, very fluent. He has great English. He's conversational. So that's what I would for sure be careful about, and understanding who you're going to be speaking to.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Do you find most of your daily assignments written or verbal or both?
It's a mixture of both. So quick example, my team, their key performance indication, their KPIs, indicators, every day they have to call 100, they have to make 100 calls a day minimum. And they also have to do LinkedIn messages and emails and stuff. So yes, they're for sure verbal, but also messaging is super important, because I think it's a little bit easier to make a misstep when you're speaking and be like, oh, like, so sorry, or just kind of ignore it and continue on. Whereas if it's written, people expect you to have like taken the time to at least like double check, even if it's quick. Moving on to growing, unless anyone has any other questions.
Yes, I have a question.
Go for it.
Regarding the home assignment, from your experience, your own personal experience as a manager, if, I don't know, the job applicant had a minor typo in the home assignment, is it a deal breaker from your opinion? after what you just said? Because there's a lot of potential in the applicant. So what's your opinion about that?
It's like pretty much a deal breaker. I'm really harsh on this. I'm sure for other managers, could be different. But for me, I think written is also extremely important. And so obviously if it's like a tiny typo and the person's super capable, am I gonna like totally be like, absolutely not? No, but it will definitely take away from their excellence in my eyes. Especially because, like, as I said, you have time to review it. It is a written assignment. So it is the least that I expect. Again, I'm very harsh about this. My team knows I'm literally crazy when it comes to messaging. I'll be like, no, that's a comma splice. Like who says that? But that's me.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Growing. So a bit about me. I went to college for business right after high school, as most Americans do. And in my senior year of college, I decided I wanted to do an internship, even though I knew I was going to be joining the Army. Excuse me. So I took an internship at CyberArk. It's an Israeli company. They're cybersecurity, but it was in their offices in Massachusetts where I was studying. And I interned in their inside sales. And basically my job was just to call different companies and invite them to lunch and learns. So basically to luncheons at steakhouses or whatever with some current customers that were CyberArk customers that would like talk a bit about CyberArk and like hype it up. There'd be a little presentation, and then there'd be like a few different companies and people from the company attending that we would want to eventually take in as customers. So that was my role. It was really, really short. It was for like 6 months. It was an internship for one of my semesters in school, and I didn't continue because it was either accept the offer, which I wasn't going to do because I was moving, or can stop working. So that was my like experience in sales. I wouldn't really say that it really added much to when I was applying for actual positions, but just so you know my background. So then I went to the Army. I served. I was in Iron Dome, and at the end of my service, I was like, okay, like I'm totally independent. My parents don't pay for anything. If I want to live in Israel, I need to find a job. I studied finance and accounting, not really my passion. I was thinking about what I could do. And I was like, I really did enjoy that internship. Let me go for something in sales. So I was looking when I was in the US on my chafshash. If you don't know, it's like the end of your service. You have like a month that's like off, sort of. You don't really have to go to the Army so often. So during that time, I was like, okay, I'm gonna look for a job so I can like pay the bills. So I was home in New York visiting my family for a bit, and I was telling my parents, and I was like, I want to look for a job in sales, and they're like, look at Glassdoor, you know, look at LinkedIn. And I was like, sure. And then I was also looking on Facebook posts in the Olim Facebook group chat or Facebook chat, no, group, Facebook group. And I saw a post from someone I had no idea who he was, being like, hey, like I work at SciSense, we're looking to add BDRs to the UK team, like reach out if you're interested. So I was like, yes, I'm interested, like let me reach out. So he was like, okay, great, like let's talk on the phone, like, because also you don't want to just like refer someone that you don't know either. Like it is good to have a bit of a conversation. So I spoke to him and he's like, sure, great. I'll send in your CV. So I sent him my CV, and I also reached out to some recruiters and etc. and sent out my CV to other companies. And I began my interview process. I got some choices. I decided SciSense is the place to go. Also got a ton of rejections. And for sure that the guy that posted on the Facebook group helped. It helped that he was able to put my CV to the top of the stack. In the end, when I spoke to him, he's like, if you get past the initial interview, let me know. I can help you. If you have any questions about the interview process, some people are going to be more helpful and hands-on than others. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, and then I was a BDR for a year and a half. The first year I was just a regular BDR on the UK team, working the UK market. I was crushing my target, brought in the most revenue for the company at our sales kickoff. I was able to win the award for #1 rep for all the international teams amongst 40 BDRs. So I was like, yes. Then I was promoted to senior BDR, which is just a promotion in title and a bit more money. And I decided I wanted to help. We were onboarding a ton of new BDRs. So I was like, yeah, like I'll help onboard them. I'll teach them. LinkedIn was where I shined as a BDR. I got a lot of meetings from LinkedIn. I mean, of course, calls and emails as well. But so I was like giving presentations on LinkedIn. And that's when I decided, while Sisense was pushing me to become an account executive, I wanted to be a team lead. And unfortunately, there weren't positions available at that time as team lead, and it didn't seem like there would be in the foreseeable future. So that's when I decided maybe it's time to look somewhere else to grow as a team lead. So I spoke to some friends, again, networking. I spoke to some friends that were working with me. I started explaining to people that had left Sisense, like, hey, like I'm interested, I'm looking to be a team lead. Found out about Zesty, reached out. Actually, there was another company that was really cool. I outbounded their recruiter. I looked up their HR and I was like, hey, like I'm really interested. Like I just sent my CV for the position, but I'd love to speak. And that also helped. So again, outbounding is good. But I interviewed with Zesty. I had no previous management experience. And when they asked me about it, I was just like, listen, I leveraged what I was able to do in the past. So I brought in the most revenue. I was really good at LinkedIn as well as other channels, but I was able to show a lot and I helped onboarding. And I just leveraged that to try and push myself into this role. And they took a chance on me, and it's been working out so far. So again, even if it's like you don't have experience, you can always use your previous experience doing something else and be like, I can bring these results, or I can do this because I did this at this other company. And yeah, you don't always need experience. Sometimes just being enthusiastic and showing that you are passionate and have done the research will help alongside, other things. So that's a bit about me. As far as growing, it's important to realize what you want to do after BDR, because it is a really difficult position and there is a burnout that comes usually around a year, year and a half, 2 years. It may come earlier, it can change, but to be aware of, from BDR, you can grow into the more traditional paths are account executive, team lead, customer success, even partnerships. But I've also seen BDRs that go into product, that go into revenue operations, sales enablement, and marketing. And finally, what to expect once you're a BDR and in order to grow. Usually between 8 months to a year and a half as a BDR. It's pretty average. Definitely important to try and achieve and overachieve your targets. That will help. And finally, networking. Something that I think was really helpful was not only networking outside, but within your company. Once you start working, get to know your COO, get to know your CEO, get to know your head of partnerships, the success managers, your marketing team, R&D, everyone. Talk to everyone in the company, because you never know where they're going to go next or who they might know. Also, it's good to be friendly with people that you work with. But again, networking is really important. So again, like at SciSense, it is a huge company. And I was just like a peewee BDR when I first started, but I caught the attention of the COO one day when he was talking. And I was like, oh, like so interesting. And then we had a little back and forth every now and then when he'd visit the sales floor. And I was able to help leverage him for a referral. So you never know, I'm not saying use people, but you never know what talking to someone in a different department may lead to. I haven't asked if anyone has questions in a while, so I wanted to stop and see if there's any questions.
I always have one, so if no one else will, I will. Okay. It almost relates to the slide before where you were talking about the growing, yeah, just all the different roles that the growing into from a business development rep. So I will speak for maybe graduates who are on the call or maybe on the webinar and some who aren't. I know that a lot of our candidates come with like a very rich background, some of which have a background that might even be even a little bit close to what a business development representative does, or a higher ranked position in the BDR world. I'll even embarrass one of our people over here, Itai, who's been a business development manager, but not in the high tech industry. So what I'm and where I'm going with my question is wondering what role would you recommend as like an entryway into high tech, but also not necessarily an entry level position, knowing that business development representative might be a little overqualified for that role.
So it's interesting. So it could be, if you had experience with creating partnerships, it could be trying to go into partnerships as like an entry level part. I mean, it would be considered entry level, but like a partnerships manager or something. Could be going into customer success if you're able to use your relationship skills. And finally, account executive might be a bit tough. I know that there at Zesty, there were 2 account executives that did not come from a BDR account executive background. They were pre-sales somewhere, so they still had that customer facing and technical experience. And someone else, I think, was just like door-to-door salesman, to be honest. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me, but you can sometimes transfer those sales skills to high tech. But yeah, it really depends on the company.
So that kind of leads me maybe to a more direct question for you in terms of, let's say, overqualified candidates. So for instance, someone approaches you on LinkedIn, but like they do have more experience than you generally hire for. How flexible are you as a manager in terms of still, wanting to meet them and interview them and kind of understand where they're at their career?
That's a great question. So actually it's happened to me a few times, and sometimes I will just like on LinkedIn at first, because I was a new manager and I didn't understand, I would just be like, nope, you're overqualified, not interested. But then I was like, wait, what a wasted opportunity. So then I'd reach out to them, and also because when I did that to the first person I ever did that to, he was like, hey, like, why did you say no? So I was like, hey, it seems like you're overqualified. Wouldn't you prefer to be an account executive or something? And then they explain. And if it's enticing enough, then yeah, for sure. Like I ended up meeting with him. And I've had other people, there's someone on my team now who is super qualified, overqualified. He was a door-to-door salesman type person, face-to-face, and he's 62 years old, like he knows sales probably better than I do. So I was like, listen, like, I see you've applied to this, but you're way overqualified. Are you sure you don't want to be an account executive? And he said, no, I really want to be on the phones. And I haven't done anything in tech, so I think it'd be important for me to start out as a BDR. So I was like, okay, fine. I interviewed him, he went through the process, and now he's on the team. And he aspires to be an account executive. I'm sure he will eventually become one. But I do try to understand why someone who is overqualified would be applying. Because if they do show that they want to learn and they're okay to be managed, happily. But there's also some people who really are like, I don't want to be told what to do. So I'm like, okay, then why are you applying for this?
I love that. I love that answer. And I think that answer is so valuable to a lot of people, whether here or, might listen to this recording after. Knowing that there are managers like you out there in the tech industry is super valuable. So thank you. Thank you for that answer. Those were my questions. If anyone else has any others.
I have to say that I have a question. I want actually you to share your personal experience as a team leader. You shared about your hiring process in Zesty, and we as career consultant always say that, ask for feedback after the interview, because when you're looking for a new job, especially when you're trying to break into a new industry, you always need to understand what you have to work on, what you have to improve, and what prevent you to find a perfect job and to be a perfect match for any position. And what I suggest to do, if you receive a email that sorry, we will continue with another candidate, ask why. If you had only a telephone call, maybe it's less relevant, but if you had a face-to-face interview and if you did some task for the position, we want people to ask and to get feedback to know where they can be better. And do you personally shares some tips, what can be done, what could be done better, and what didn't you like too much, and why didn't you reject, or maybe how to ask to receive this answer?
Sure. So it's really hard from a manager's standpoint, especially when I was hiring, or I was interviewing hundreds of people, and I was also trying to make sure that I was training and coaching my team and onboarding them and stuff. It can be challenging to get back to everyone that wants feedback. So something that I did, if I just did an initial phone interview with you and you weren't the right fit, I would send just a generic email, right? Like a template that I had. If someone had done an assessment and taken that much time to do something, and after I met with them face to face about an assessment, I would not send an email because I think that's really impersonal and rude. So I'd always call them and I'd say, this is what you did well. This is why I'm not taking you. But you did this and this well, it's kind of, so it's doesn't end on a bad note, but that's where I'd give the feedback. You had a lot of typos, the writing was not strong enough, and you clearly had not done enough research on Zesty. However, you showed a lot of passion and you're clearly excited to learn and motivated. And I think those are all really strong qualities, whatever. And also something before. So that's how I would give feedback. It's not the best feedback, right? It's not a whole breakdown of what went wrong. And then finally, if there were people who did really well and I liked, but they just weren't the right fit. And if they emailed me back and they're like, oh, can I ask for some feedback? I would try to give feedback, but sometimes there's just not enough time.
Yep, sure. I understand. Thank you for the answer. And now I'm thinking about the following question. If someone was lucky to have some feedback, can he apply in 2 or 3 months when he did his homework and when he feels more confident about these points that you showed that he can work on? And is it possible, especially in Zesty, to apply twice in a year, not twice in 6 months? What is the politically correct answer?
I actually don't quite know. I always encourage someone, like, if you don't get the position the first time, like, for sure, like, apply back in a few months if it's still of interest to you. And it's like kind of like how I think about buying clothes at the store. Like, maybe I'm not sure if I'm going to get it this time, and then I walk away. And if it's like I'm still thinking about it for the next few days, then I'll go back and buy it. So if you're still thinking about Zesty and you're interested and it's like sincere, like you really liked it, for sure, I think you should always try and apply again. Like, why not? Although I would suggest don't apply for 2 positions at once. That generally does not look so great. So like if you apply for like partnerships manager and BDR or account executive and BDR, don't do that. But yeah, you can definitely apply again. There's actually one BDR that I was talking to. He was a candidate and he was amazing. Like, I would have hired him. It's just the English was an issue. And I told him that. I was upfront. I was like, listen, you're great, just the English. So I kept in touch with him on LinkedIn, and they were looking, one of my friends' companies was looking for a BDR, and it didn't matter so much the level of English. So I referred him for that position, and we're still in touch. So it's definitely beneficial if you have a good relationship with the manager, even if it's not for that position. Maybe they could help you in the future. I'm not sure how many managers are going to do that, but you might fall upon someone who is helpful.
Okay,
Can I ask
thank you
something,
so much.
please?
Sure.
Thanks. I joined 10 minutes late, sorry, I had to work. So I don't know if you talked about it, but I have 2 questions. So what is the difference between BDR and SDR? That's the first. And the second is like salary expectations, like for junior, how much would you say? And for 1 or 2 years of experience, I don't know, that's it.
Sure. So honestly, it is the most debated thing, I think, in the industry, what BDR and SDR, like what the roles are. What they stand for is sales development representative and business development representative. I consider a business development representative outbound and a sales development representative inbound. However, other companies may say other things. They might say that SDR is also outbound or a BDR does inbound. So it's really, you need to double check what is going to be happening in that role, because one can never tell anymore.
Okay, can you explain what do you mean outbound and inbound? Sorry.
Sure.
If I'm like...
So inbound means that there's going to be probably from marketing or a demand generation person in the company giving you leads. So people or companies to reach out to that are a little bit warm. Either they signed up for a free trial on the website, or they looked at an ad, or they came to a webinar, and you have to follow up and try and bring them to a meeting. Whereas outbound is going to be completely on your own. You need to research the companies, figure out based off of your knowledge of what your company that you're working for does, if they're the right customer profile. Then you need to reach out to them, cold call, LinkedIn messages. Also,
basically,
email, yeah.
Outbound is like cold calling, and inbound is like warm leads. That's the...
Yeah, inbound is also kind of a little bit like cold calling. Unfortunately, with inbound, even warm leads, sometimes they're like, how'd you get my number? Who are you? Like, I didn't look at your website. But yeah, ideally it should be slightly warmer leads. And you aren't the one sourcing the leads. You're receiving them somehow.
Yeah, and about the salaries expectation?
As far as salary expectation, to be honest, I've been out of the BDR game for so long. You need to understand first the compensation structure, right? Like if it's your base plus commission, or if it's all one. And then from there, I couldn't give you unfortunately, a good number to say for base. But I would try and always do at least 60-40, meaning 60% is your base and 40% is your commission, so that you know you're getting X amount every month, and I personally think it's better than 50-50, because then if you don't hit your commission, you're only getting half of what your on target is. If you have 1 or 2 years of experience as a BDR and you're looking to, sorry, I have a cramp. If you're looking for to grow as a senior BDR, or start somewhere else as like the first BDR or whatever, then I would just kind of calculate what your current on target salary is and what you feel you should be making or want to make, and give them that number. Like, even if it's a little high, and then negotiate based off the base. Because again,
but,
it's just important.
let's say
I'm gonna chime in.
that
Wait, Elon, I'm going to chime in really quick and just give you kind of my knowledge on your question. The salary ranges, the base salary range is generally, the average runs about between 8,000 shekels to 12,000 shekels. That would be like for an entry level role. But then that also can change based on how much experience you bring with you and how much value you prove that you may have for the role. And with that, your base salary can also increase. But if you're looking for average range, that would be the average, between 8 to 12,000 base salary. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
I have a few questions, Ashley.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So the first question is, it's what I'm doing, and I would like your opinion on this. If I see a role that I want to apply for, I usually tend to connect with the hiring manager on a LinkedIn and write first before I apply via website, and trying to connect on the personal level and exclaiming why I want to apply. Like kind of a short version of the cover letter directly to the hiring manager. What is your look on that?
So I think that's excellent. Truly, like, go for it. And I think on top of that, I'd also just include like reaching out to someone on the team that you're applying to. So for example, you're applying to the partnerships team, reach out to one of the partnerships managers as well and be like, hey, interested in your company, want to hear about this role. Can we speak? Like I said in the beginning, speak to them and have them submit your CV for you. So now the partnership manager is aware of who you are, but it's still going to go to the top of the pile because someone's referring you. So then when they like see your CV, they'll remember, oh, like the name's familiar, and they might make the connection between the CV and your LinkedIn message.
Okay, and thank you for, it's very helpful. And another question is, what's your this is about remote work. So what is your personal take on it as remote? And where do you see the trend is going in terms of Bdr segment? Is going to be more the same? Will it be subside of we're done with the coronavirus, etc.?
So as far as the trend, I think it would be incorrect if I gave anything, because I'm not well versed and I don't want to mislead you. But as far as working remote or not, I personally, again, right, I don't have any children. I live near work. It's not a big commute, so it's different for me than other people's situations. For me personally, I prefer to work from the office, and I like that my team works from the office because it is a difficult position. You're going to get a lot of objections. You're going to get a lot of no's, and it's draining. And I think that it's nice to be in an environment where you can like turn to your coworker, who hopefully becomes your friend, and you can be like, oh, like I just got screamed at on the phone, like let's get coffee, or let's go on a walk, or like just joke around with the team and laugh a bit and then continue calling. I think that it makes the day a little easier. And no matter how many meetings you have on Slack or Zoom or Teams, you kind of miss that when you're working remotely, and it could be a bit harder for you as the months go on working in the role.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. All right, so I guess I'll just end on a bit about Zesty. So on the right, you'll see my team, my beautiful team. We actually have two jolters. We have George and Ben. And
she means, we have to clarify, jolters at Jolt mean the people who teach Jolt. So we call the Jolt alumni.
oh, sorry, the Jolt alumni. Oops. So we have two Jolt alumni on the team. And a bit about Zesty, we have two different products. We basically automate and optimize costs for the cloud for people or for businesses using AWS and Azure. We most recently raised $35 million in a Series A. And I mean, that's really brief about Zesty. Feel free to look it up, or if you want, I can talk about Zesty for hours. But I know that we all have other commitments today. So I just want to show you a little bit about the team and about my Jolt alumni.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I know we kind of ran a little bit overtime with all the questions live. So even though we didn't actually have Q&A at the end, I think that, you know, for the most of us, I know for me, all my questions were answered. I do just want to give like the last 2 minutes before we say goodbye, if anyone has any final questions before we go.
For sure. Also, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
You're the best. You're really the best. Okay, perfect. So Ashley, I do want to take this opportunity to thank you again. Not only was your presentation and your webinar extremely insightful about the hiring process and about, you know, Zesty and how your company approaches hiring, but I also think that knowing that, hearing you talk about how you hire and how you go through these recruitment processes as a manager, it's, I think, very comforting for us all to know that there are managers out there who exist like you, who are so open-minded and so willing and accepting for like diversity, and so professional at the same time. So thank you so much for sharing all your insight with us and kind of giving us the tips and tricks on how to get into our first BDR role in the high-tech industry. It was such a pleasure listening to you, and I can't wait to kind of collaborate again. And guys, you heard her. Connect, network.
I have lots of friends. I can also help connect you to other companies. We're not hiring currently, but I'm happy to help in any way I can. Mock interviews, whatever.
You're amazing.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Very, very useful. Thank you, Ashley.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Bye bye, guys.